Everyone agrees that service is a wonderful gift, from those with much to those with little. But we should not sacrifice the great value of voluntary service by turning it into a government requirement. This quote, stated by former member of the United States House of Representatives, Bob Barr, sums up our philosophy as the negative team. Good morning, judges and classmates. The resolution stated by the affirmative resolved that the United States federal government should establish a system of compulsory national service for all U.S. citizens between the ages of 18 to 24 is impractical, illogical, and undesirable. To begin, national service is service in the armed forces or civil service, with civil service being defined as government jobs not involving the military that would in today's law be voluntary services, for example, Peace Corps. By U.S. citizens, we are implying a native or nationalized member of the U.S. who owes allegiance to its government and is entitled to its protection and under its law. In the past, the United States government has issued multiple drafts, also known as conscription, in such cases as Vietnam. Also, Charles Rangel, a New York congressman, has issued 3 bills to require national service in 2003, 2006, and 2007, all which were shot down. Never in the United States history has national service been mandatory, which further proves our points and our beliefs, which is that Iris and I both believe that having mandatory national service is a violation of people's rights in our democracy and would undermine professionalism, and it would severely damage our economy. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Written in our Declaration of Independence by our third president, Thomas Jefferson. The 3 unalienable rights we all share as citizens. Liberty or freedom, one thing that if one were forced into doing national service, then they would not have. Phil Woodall, a private in Vietnam War, says in his letter to his dad, a Negro from Rochester, New York, was killed. He was a fine man, a good leader. Yet he could not understand the whys of this conflict, which called him 10,000 miles away from his home. This quote shows how people who were forced into the army, not even knowing what they were fighting for, died. How can you live with yourself if you force someone into doing something and they die from it? You couldn't. So why would you want our government to do this? Overall, this is undemocratic and simply unjust. Our nation was built on democracy and freedom of all men. So how can we throw this all away when we make mandatory national service? The only freedom a person has is whether to do military or civil service. Let us not change the way our nation was built upon. Let's stay at our democratic roots. Secondly, having been a soldier for 3 years now, I'm totally against conscription. I could never fully trust anyone forced into my profession for a short amount of time. Stated by Upper Dublin graduate Ensign Evan Seyfried of the U.S. Navy, introduces our next argument. By instituting mandatory service, I can guarantee the workers and soldiers cannot be trusted to work their hardest. They are taken and thrown to a place far from the comfort zone. Our army is already big, so why force people to go in it when they are not going to work as effective? Or why have people do voluntary work when they're also not going to work as effective? Another thing, forcing someone to do voluntary work is completely against the definition of voluntary work. Now, you could have said that having mandatory national service would boost patriotism. No. Memorial Day, July 4th, and the Olympics boost patriotism. Not this. You cannot force patriotism. It is a pride of your nation. And how can you have pride in your nation when it compels you to do something that you do not want to do? Lastly, having national service would brutally damage our economy. First off, mandatory military service and the effects it would have on our nation. An article on NolanChart.com states that the United States spends more money on defenses than the next 11 nations combined. This shows that we already spend too much money for our army, and then having a bigger army will just lead to more money. The basic pay of an active private, the lowest ranking in an army, is, according to GoArmy.com, makes around $17,000. And that's just the basics of basics. So just imagine what it can get to. Also, money would need to be spent on more supplies. The Brookings Institution, a nonprofit policy organization, states the federal cost for a full-time AmeriCorps member is about $19,000, and then add other minor costly additions like supplies. Since this is all government-funded money, the money has to come from somewhere. You know where it comes from? You. You have to pay the taxes that will fund these things. And since mandatory national service will expand these groups, taxes will rise, and no one wants to pay more taxes than they already do. In conclusion, making mandatory national service is unjust and illogical. It corrupts the democratic roots we were founded upon. It will make workers and soldiers not try as hard, and it will hurt our economy. Iris and I both believe that having this kind of service is just plain out unnecessary. That when we already have enough people fighting and working for America. Remember the ancient common sense adage, too much of anything is bad for you. That includes service. Vote negative.